Good afternoon, everybody. I've been asked by somebody who emailed me on my email address, which is in the description of all my videos, just what's involved in my series of videos I did about using refurbished handlebar switchgears off classic Japanese bikes. You know, they're cast alloy. I do get emails for quite a lot these days from people who've had various issues with the bike. And one of them, I had an email the other day from somebody whose indicator switch just made a crunch and stopped working. That was a person in Canada, and somebody else had a problem with the starter button, and a third person had a problem with, I think it was either the headlamp flasher or I think it might have been the kill switch. As I've put in previous videos, I personally think the stock switchgear is no good, and it's starting to fail on the sort of 2019 bikes, I notice. So somebody asked me, what do I do? Well, there's a switch which I bought, a classic Japanese switch. Now the picture shows the general condition that these are in. They're about probably 28 years old, Japanese, and they have cast aluminium bodies on them. And I did a previous video, I'll not keep waffling on about what I've said already, but basically the innards of the Royal Enfield switchgear are not particularly impressive, whereas these Japanese switches have been around for a long time. So I thought I'd detail just what I do. So there you can see, this is a switch that I obtained. They normally look like that. You get this oxidization of the red switches, particularly where the sun's been on them. The flasher switch is quite bad for that. I've read, you know, people say, well, you can get a butane lighter and you can heat it and so on. I've tried that. It can be a bit risky because it's easy to burn that plastic. It's no good polishing it off because it doesn't seem to work. So I have a little trick that I do. You'll see later on just what I do to these switches. So this is a left-hand switch gear. That there is the dip switch. Now, as I've said in previous videos, the insides of these are incomparably better to the Royal Enfield. They just are. They've got solid copper contacts, and the whole mechanism, especially the indicator, is transformed really. I've got them on my bike. Len Hartley's got them on his. I think Marek Pawlowski, he's got the left-hand one, and now this chap in Canada, I'll be sending him this refurbished one. This next picture shows the indicator. It's the same principle as the Royal Enfield, where you push the indicator switch to one side, and if you want to cancel it, you push it in the middle. So in other words, it moves to the left and then returns to the middle, and then to cancel the indicator you push. Exactly the same, but the mechanism itself, which I'll show you pictures of, is just far superior. And when cleaned and lubricated and so on, it's really nice to use. So this next picture shows how many, well, it's not even all of them, bits there are inside. And as you can see, there's little ball bearings and springs and screws. There are a lot of bits. So not only do I take the switches out, and then I take the switches apart, and each one of them has a spring and a ball bearing, and so by careful cleaning, and I'll show you what I use. There, for example, that is the horn switch. So you can see there's a spring and a ball bearing. That round hole on the white bracket next to the thing that looks like a Space Invader, that is where the ball bearing sits, and as you push the switch, the ball bearing moves. It's very, very positive action on that. So I strip them all down, clean everything, clean the contacts with a product which I'll show you later. So there you can see another shot of that one. Now, if there's any, obviously they're old, however, they are so well made. If you look at the white bits, you can see there's two little circular bits. That's the pivot that the switch moves on, articulates on, and I put a small amount of grease in there and clean the ball bearing because they're normally a bit rusty. Grease that. That spring is part of the contact, so that has to be clean as well. That's the indicator arm. As you can see, I cleaned them, and then it's engraved on it, the off and the little arrow, so I normally put white paint in there, gloss. And it's a really solid mechanism. Not only does the switch itself, which that arm moves, have a ball bearing and a spring in it, but then it also has a supplementary ball bearing spring to make sure that everything feels really positive. As you can see, that spring there, the big one, that makes the contact when you push the switch. So I stripped them down completely, clean the contacts, lubricate the bits that move. I put grease around the springs so they don't rust. And I use an amazing product which people might be familiar with, might not be. It's called Deoxit. And you spray it onto electrical contacts and it takes all the oxide off. Now that is very expensive. It's about £24 for a 142 gram tin. You don't need much. And you spray it on and you can see it kind of fizzes a bit and it gets rid of all that green deposit that you get on copper contacts. It also takes off crusty sort of stuff of aluminium as well, and I've even used it on plastic. So it's a really good product, worth every penny, although it is expensive, but it lasts long enough if you're careful with it. So having stripped the switch, I then obviously take the terminal block off because it's from a different bike, and I then crimp on new terminals for the new block connector. As I've said in previous videos, I don't like chopping the wiring harness. I don't want to be doing anything to the original block terminals on the original wiring harness. So I found the block connectors that are right for making the switchgear sort of plug and play. So it just plugs straight in. This one I refurbished today, which these photographs are from. What I do is I test it with a multimeter and then I put it on my bike. I take my headlamp shell off and test it to make sure it works properly. So having got the casings off, I use etch primer. I sand them down to bare aluminium, and then I use etch primer, which is obviously necessary for aluminium to give it a good key, and I give the 2 coats of etch primer and 2 or 3 coats of black gloss paint. And obviously it goes on better if the paint's warm and if the actual casings are warm, so I normally put them on various things next to my wood burning stove actually. So there's the bottom part of the switchgear. That's had a couple of coats of primer and it's sitting there next to my wood burner, not too hot, just warm, and I let the paint cure for a long time, probably about 4 or 5 hours at least. That's one half of the cast alloy casing. This next photograph shows the other half. So I normally do this after refurbishing all the switchgear, all the switches and things. So there it is, that's the actual top part of the casing. Now, as I said before, the cast alloy. So Royal Enfield handlebars have got little holes in them for a plastic peg that sticks out of the plastic stock switch to stop it spinning. But with these you don't have that. Because they're cast alloy, you can really tighten them up. So you can actually alter the angle of the switch itself, which you can't do on the Royal Enfield standard switches because it's got a locating peg on it, simply because they're made of plastic. Of course these you can clamp them. Now that's had a couple of coats of black gloss. Bearing in mind this is probably from 1986, so you're looking at what, 28 years, is it? Is it 28 years? My maths is awful. 2024, no, that's 24 years. Oh, it's more. Yeah, 36 years? Heavens above. There you go. So that's the top bit. And this next photograph shows the bottom bit. I've never had one yet. I've done several. I've never had one yet that is not usable. By the time, when I get them, they're stiff and, pretty manky looking. But when I've given them the treatment, I've never had one yet where it's got anything wrong with it. There's no excessive wear of the contacts. In fact, for some of it, it's no discernible signs of use at all. Things like the headlamp flasher and the horn. And as I've said in previous videos, the electrical contacts themselves are probably at least twice, if not 3 times, bigger in diameter than the stock ones. That's a picture of the terminal block on the end, a new one, so that fits straight into the Royal Enfield in the headlamp shell. I use self-amalgamating tape at the bottom because it has the original vinyl sleeve on the switchgear. Again, that is superior to what's on the Royal Enfield. Mine's cracked on my original switchgear. I don't know if anybody else has noticed that. The sheathing, it takes a bend and it cracks, whereas the Japanese stuff doesn't. That's obviously the indicator off switch. That surface stuff there is nothing really. It's galvanized originally, but it doesn't affect the functionality, and you can't actually see it anyway. And this last few pictures here show the finished product, which will be going to Canada and hopefully get there very, very soon. So that's the actual finished switch and tested on my bike. As I say, I can test it with an ohm meter and all the switches work properly, but the best way of doing it really is I just whip the headlamp shell off, plug it in and make sure everything works properly. So that's one view of the refurbished switch. There's another one. You can see in that picture where the handlebars would go, there's like a clear plastic sleeve as well, which protects the indicator mechanism, I presume from sort of dirt and things dropping onto the contacts or what have you, or the handlebars touching the wires or something. There was a good it's like a sheathing in there. Here's another view of the same switch, and the indicator, all the switches are just really nice to use. I mean, it sounds a bit nerdy, but when I go out on mine, as I did today, it's just so nice. It's just so smooth, the indicator switch, and they're so crisp. So it's in a sense it's addressing potential faults, because switches have developed faults. I know people may post and say, well, I've had my bike for X number of years and the switchgear's fine, which is, if it is, great, mine wasn't, as I said in previous videos, hence looking into this modification. That's the headlamp flasher there. Sorry for the blurred pic. But it's more a question of, I think, avoiding trouble in the future. And as I say, I do get emails from people, with anecdotal evidence saying, my switch is broken. So there you go. Now that's my bike. They've been on for a long time. There's the Badger grips I posted the video about earlier. I make a better job of the switches now than I did on my own. They were sort of prototype-ish, but that's what they look like when they're on. That's the right hand side one, obviously. It runs with the original throttle tube and the original throttle cable, and that's the left hand side. And what a difference, massively so. So in answer to the question of somebody who said, what do you do to these switches when you get them, that's a sort of brief resume. It takes about, altogether it must take 5 or 6 hours. So there you have it. That's what's been going on. I hope that answers the question that I had the email about, and I hope it's been of some interest to people. The switches function absolutely perfectly. Excellent to use, and I would strongly recommend trying to do that. So in the meantime, ride safe, may your switchgear not let you down, and I will post again when I have something to say. Speak soon. Bye.